we're all back now, so let's fire ahead. We've got quite a few agenda items to get through, so reconvene the meeting and move on to item 10, which is the Key Projects Monitoring Report for April 2016, and that's on page 93.
I'm happy to move it.
Thank you. I have a seconder.
I'll second.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Is there any discussion on the Key Projects Monitoring Report? There being none, those in favour, please say that the report be received. Please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Item number 11 is the contract for HVAC and plumbing services. You're going to take that one?
Yep.
Okay. And so David will speak to that.
As Scott's away, I'll speak to that. I'll take the report as read. I will, however, point out number 27, that sentence should not be in the report. It's an error. There were no presentations, and it's not standard for us to do presentations. The tender was relatively clear in terms of what response we wanted. But happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Yep, Councillor Mallett.
Just regarding, did you say 27 didn't happen?
Number 27, correct. There were no presentations.
Is that what do we normally do? Do we normally have a? Well, this is, I suppose this is a cut and paste out of the previous amendment.
Correct, and that's where the errors come.
Okay. And so do we? Was this? So we did a different process than we normally do for a tender?
No, the last one just happened to have a presentation. It really depends on the complexity of the tender.
Oh, okay. So it's not material that we didn't do a
Not at all.
Presentation. Beg your pardon.
Councillor Tooman, did you have a question?
No, I'm just going to move.
Okay, thank you. So Councillor Tooman has moved recommendation from management.
Second.
Paragraph 8. Your Worship, a second. Any discussion on the contract? Okay, those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? Carried. Item 12 is the municipal endowment lease freeholding of 58 Willoughby Street.
I'll move. I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion on this report?
I just have one question, if I may. I just observed on page 104 that there's, in respect of the land, am I right that it's entirely concreted in the front? There's actually no permeable surface on that property.
It's the new green, man.
Clearly, I just noticed that in the photo. Am I looking at that correctly?
Or the one next door, or the one
No.
behind it, or
Yes,
the one
no,
behind
no,
it.
I can see for myself, Councillor King. I was just referring to this particular project. Am I looking at that correctly?
So Nick, we're on page 104, and the question is whether or not there's any grass on the land.
I don't think there is.
If you look at
That's all concrete, is it?
Yes, it's a parking area at the front, Your Worship. There's a small area of grass around the perimeter, and I don't know if you can make out the sort of triangular area.
fine.
That's small grass.
That's fine. Just interesting.
Okay, so I've got just a question, Councillor Mallett.
This is zoned high density residential land,
Yeah, no,
so it doesn't require.
No, I'm not making any comment, Councillor King. I think you've misinterpreted. I was simply asking,
Anyway,
am I looking at that
my
correctly?
question-
You've misinterpreted
Once the staff
entirely
is finished,
my question.
Councillor Mallett had signalled to me that he had a question.
just the net proceeds again generate 5.9%. How do you figure that? Is that what reduction in debt, or what is? How's that come about?
Sorry, which?
Paragraph. Oh, sorry, Nick. Paragraph 24. Bullet point 24. The land currently generates 3.24.
Yep.
Net sales proceeds of 415 will generate 5.9.
Yes, that's right.
And where's the 5.9 come from?
The 5.9%, and correct me if I'm wrong, is the current rate that we receive on the Invested Municipal Endowment Fund cash.
It's already in the Municipal Endowment Fund, this, isn't it?
No, it's not. So it's a
Lease.
ground lease, and that we get rental of 13,000 for the ground lease. So that rental represents a 3.24% return on the current value of that piece of land.
Ground, yep.
We're going to now sell it for 415,000, and that money, once these assets are sold, goes into the cash reserve of the Municipal Endowment Fund, which is currently earning 5.9%.
That assumes that because cash doesn't earn 5.9%.
Well, that's the rate I'm told from the finance team is applied to the cash reserve of the Municipal Endowment Fund.
Do you want to,
Yeah.
how does that come?
I can
Okay.
clarify that. If you look on page 83, you'll see that our net cost of funds currently is 5.9%
Okay, so that's it.
in that graph.
Yeah.
So that's our cost, our cost of capital or our cost of borrowing. Yeah.
So that would be so in other words, because we wouldn't have to borrow so much, we would be saving
We would be saving
5.9%.
5.9, yeah. So, Councillor Forsyth?
Yeah, this is, do we have many residential assets that we sell like this?
We have a very dwindling number, so there are currently remaining 6 of these municipal endowment leases, and of those, 4 are residential properties.
And our policy says that upon the lessee's application to purchase, then we have there's no policy that says we must sell, it's just up to us.
No, it's in our interest to sell. They generate a very low rate of return, and the money can be better spent elsewhere.
Thank you.
So, Chair, just to be helpful to Councillor Forsyth, and Councillor Gallagher was on the council at the time, there used to be around 100 leasehold sections, and council went out and made an offer for a restricted period that if you freeholded within the next 28 days, there was a discount, and I can't remember whether it was 80% or 85%, but that caused a large number of people to want to take advantage of that. The policy then went on to today's policy, where if the remaining few can freehold the leasehold land, but it's got to be done at full market valuation.
And they've been dwindling down. In the time that I've been here, we've freeholded another 6, so roughly one each year.
Thanks.
Councillor King?
Just to question you on the low rate of return at 3.8% compared with 5.8% averages. I think that's the figures you used, but you're not taking into account capital gain, and I'd propose that this property's doubled in price and land value in the last 18 months, 2 years. So if you took that into account, holding leasehold properties, I believe, are inflation-proof and a very, very good return for the holder, because all you're looking at is the return on capital at the time. You're not looking at the inflation proofing and the capital gain on the property.
No, I think it's true to say our interest does, council's interest does appreciate in value. I mean, this one is an interesting one because it's increased 43% in value over the last calendar year. In fact, slightly less than a calendar year, over about 10 months. So the council's ownership or interest in the land is certainly appreciating in value, that is true. But we don't control the development of the site. It's very, very passive, and we don't really gain any advantage from continuing to own the lands.
Aren't those the best investments you can get?
Well, they are if we can realise the capital, I think. But the land will always appreciate in value, but our ability to use it is very limited, very constrained by the perpetual leases.
And just one further question is around the rates. Are the rates in any way discounted because of the lease?
No.
No, so that the rates of 5,100 will continue after the freehold?
Yes, that's
It's only the lessee payments that will stop?
correct.
Yep. Okay, so we have a mover and a seconder? Yep. So any debate on the recommendation? There being none, those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Next item is the item 13, the Masters Avenue shops and the extension of the 3 leases at that shopping centre.
I'm happy to take the report as read, Mr Chairman, and answer any questions.
Thanks.
I'll move the recommendation when ready.
Sorry, Councillor King?
Why has this come before council?
The staff delegation only extends to 5 years for lease renewals, and the parties involved have specifically requested a 6-year term for their lease. So it sits outside our delegation. We pointed that out to them, but they specifically requested that council consider this matter.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Chesterman, then I'll come to you, Martin.
Has there been any consideration by the subcommittee to selling this block of shops? I understand about the potential extension to the library, but it just seems to be we have moved out of this sort of business, and so why are we really still in it? And does that extension of the library, is that on the cards? Are we definitely doing it? Is it committed?
The first part of your question, has the sale been considered? The short answer is no, it hasn't. And I think the reason for that is that the purpose in acquiring these shops was to allow for future expansion of the library. That has been discussed periodically over many, many years, but currently there is no planning document that provides for that extension.
Councillor Gallagher.
Yes, to the council's library director or Lance, an absolute assurance that you're totally happy with this 2021, and I do respect it's not sitting in the plan, but there are clear aspirations, obviously, as things evolve.
Yeah, so through you, Mr Chairman, Sue and I have discussed this with Nicholas at length, and A, there's no money in the LTP for this. B, coming out of the strategic plan that was ticked off last calendar year, we still have to look at a facilities plan for libraries going forward, which will be completed before the consideration of the next LTP. We don't believe that we'll be in a place to actually have a decision around the Hillcrest library precinct long term. I think it's probably a bigger discussion about where are the libraries going forward, and so I think that's something that we should just keep the option open, but don't close that off. And obviously this gives the those tenants there at the moment a bit more longevity of surety of their tenure there in the meantime, and council earns some money. So we're saying keep the option open, but notwithstanding when we go through that facilities review. Obviously, you know, going through the strategic plan, libraries are a changing face with you know, new technologies and that sort of thing. The thing we need to think through is around what is a library of a future that the working group talked about, and it's around probably more of a community space rather than just being a repository of book and readable material. There's a lot more online things happening now, and our collections are actually reflecting that too.
Yeah, so, I mean, what you're saying is there's still, I mean, there's potential, there's discussions to be had. It's a bigger discussion than just a 1 to 5 or 6 square metres there. Thank you.
Councillor Forsyth, you had a question?
No.
Oh, sorry. Any further questions of Nicholas?
Oh, so I said I'd move.
Oh, you're happy to move? Okay,
yeah.
well, let's do that. And Deputy Mayor Chesterman second. Okay, so we've got...
So, Chair, I was just going to test whether, and if the mover and the seconder are happy to include that a report go to the B&I subcommittee about consideration for sale of this property. In the last term at council, there was consideration of the sale of this property, and it was deferred because the library's strategic plan had not been done, and that had to be done first. And the intention was, I'm just recalling here, don't quote me on it, that once that was clarified, that then it would come back with the normal processes of consideration for sale. So,
I'll be happy to do that.
I mean, it's just a consideration of it because we sort of put off because the library's plan hadn't been done, and as the General Manager said, the library's strategic plan has now been done, and that of course identified a very changing role that libraries have, you know, in terms of technology and stuff. So if the mover and seconder are happy, we could add a D that there's a report to, I think would have to go to the B&I subcommittee, I think that's where they go, to consider sale of this property.
So you're happy with that, Councillor Forsyth?
But then it needs change to C.
It's just an addition, is it?
Yeah,
Yeah, just an
B&E.
addition, yeah. And Deputy Mayor Chesterman is?
Yeah,
Sorry, I'll just make sure that they've got, you've got that, Becca, you've got that down. Just a question here from councillor Mallett, and then I'll come across.
So currently, the recommendation as we have in front of us is that we extend a lease. If we extend a lease and we're selling it at the same time, that's...
No, I'm not saying we are at all.
Yeah, no, but considering it, yep.
I'm just saying let's have a
So,
look at it. 'cause
so
it's
if we extend the lease, so passing this will extend the leases. So that means if we are selling it, we'll be selling something with 6 years, leases of 6 years and rights renewals. So that may or may not improve the value of the property. It's just...
I would expect it to improve the value of the
It's going to
property.
be better than a one-year lease.
Okay, so, well, it depends if the other people want to build, you know, a potential buyer might want to bulldoze and put a supermarket or something,
Well,
who
then they
knows?
won't buy.
So certainly if there is leases in place, it will have an impact on the valuation. I don't know which way.
Of course.
Okay.
So if you sell it, you're closing the library?
No, I'm not.
No one's
Councillor
selling
Gallagher.
anything.
Well, no, you're looking at selling it, so what does it mean for the library?
The
Simple
library would
question.
have a lease,
The red,
wouldn't it?
the red bit.
Huh?
The red bit, which isn't the library. The shop's next to the library.
Shops are separate from the
Page
library.
106.
Yes, but you're closing off the option. If you sell those shops, you're closing off the option of strategically reviewing of that potential library space and expansion. You're closing that off, obviously.
No,
And
because
that's what I think the B&I subcommittee
that's what I'm
will
saying.
need to
Bring a
consider.
report to let's have a look at this,
Yeah.
because my recollection was that there was, in the last council, there was a lot of discussion, pages and pages of discussion on properties, and a process went through. This one was no discussion about it because the library strategic plan had to be done, and it's reminded me that it hasn't sort of made its way back on for discussion, and I mean, it's a good thing in my view.
Well, if you do that, I want a complete review of the potential for that site for an expanded library facility in 2022.
Well, I think my thought was that obviously if a report's going to come, it would have to consider the library strategic plan. It would have to, because, you know, it's right next door to it. Yeah.
So what would that, through the chair, what does that mean around you you can get on and do this lease?
Oh, the lease would, yeah, the lease would still be, the lease would still be approved, the extension of the lease would still be improved. It would be just, as I understand it, I think the intention would be that the B&I subcommittee would look at what the parameters were around the sale of the property and what would be the factors that we would need to consider around that sale, which would include responding to the library strategic plan.
Well, I'd be opposing it because this is thin end of the wedge, pension housing, Riverlea. It's a very familiar narrative to me, frankly. I think it's crazy. I think you'd want to actually work out, first of all, what you're going to do with the library, then you can look at this as a consequence.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. It's up on the board now. And I have a mover and a seconder for that motion. Is there any discussion or debate on the motion? Councillor Gallagher.
I will be opposing this, and I want to say to the people of Hillcrest that this is potentially means that a good library looking into the future could be curtailed, and I would rather discussion first that I think what you're suggesting is you renew the lease or extend the lease for 2 or 3 years. This was a report that actually asked for a holding pattern, and it asked for a holding pattern for 3 years or 3 or 4 years, and I think that's not unreasonable. We have a library strategic view. I realise that there are other whole range of priorities too in that narrative, and if this is successful, then I would appeal to the B&I committee to have the library team in there and have a very thorough and comprehensive discussion as to what extension of floor space into the neighbouring shop or whatever in the next 3 or 4, in 2022 or 23, if the budget was there, and what that might mean as a community facility for that area. And I always know about thin end of the wedges, and I know where this could actually lead, and I think we've seen plenty of examples in this city in very recent years
as to where sort of these things lead. In my view, I think this is premature, and I would far rather us to have sorted out our aspiration for library services in the 21st century in the Hillcrest, Hamilton East area, in terms of where we might want to take that space before we even look at a potential sale of that commercial property. Now, that's not to say that once that library space issue is sorted, and we've sorted our aspirations for that, that's our prime focus. That's not to say that the remainder of a property should not be put up for sale. I certainly have an open mind on that.
Any further debate or discussion?
Oh,
Councillor
comments.
Forsyth.
Let's just rein this in a little bit here. This is putting 2 and 2 together and getting 22. This is just a
Point of
report.
order. Point of order.
Okay.
Point of order.
The point of order is?
2 and 2 does not equal 22.
Correct. Thank you for that.
I think you
What
should
do you mean?
rule
Really
on that.
enlightening. An enlightening
I'd have
point
to
of
say,
order.
I'd have
Thank
to
you.
say, as a chartered accountant, Councillor Gallagher is right, but I don't think it was being used in a arithmetic computation.
So I'll withdraw that. So let's not jump to horrendous conclusions then. This is asking for a report. It's got nothing to do with whether we're going to be shutting a library down, and I think it's actually quite alarmist saying comments like that are going to be, poor old people of Hillcrest are going to be thinking, my word, according to some councillors, the library is in jeopardy. It's not that at all. We're looking at lease arrangements or renewing a lease arrangement for the properties next door, and we're looking at options for the sale of that particular property. We're not touching the library at all, so let's keep it in context.
Councillor McPherson.
Yes, I'm glad that Councillor Forsyth has mentioned keeping things in context, because if she was doing a job as a councillor of that ward, she would know that one of the contexts around the Hillcrest Library has been that it has been in jeopardy from time to time over the last 10 or 12 years, being one of the smaller libraries.
Point of order.
What's your point of order?
My point of order is I am doing my job as a councillor on the East Ward. Thank you.
Not a point of order.
As I said, if Councillor Forsyth, and I'll repeat
Thank
that,
you-
was
thank you
doing
for
her
that ruling, Councillor
job
King.
as a councillor in the East Ward, she would know that that was the case. Whether she agrees with it or not, I'm not commenting.
Point of order, I do know that's the case.
Oh, good. Then you do know the context is that that has been in jeopardy in the past, and that the issue of where the Hillcrest Library might or might not go in future, in a sort of philosophical sense, is very much up in the air. We don't have the answers to that. It has been pointed out that if you wanted to expand it, you would need, to be logical and cost effective, you would need at least some of the floor space next door to the existing library. So,
Point of order, I don't recall any such discussions about what Councillor McPherson is talking about regarding the library.
So where is the point of order in terms of...
Well, I think it's incorrect. It's factually incorrect.
well, that's not a point of order.
I think it is.
Okay, if you had been on the council a bit longer or done your homework before you were elected as council for that area, you may well know that, because it's certainly in council records. And if I had a lemon here, I'd be showing this to you. Just stop being sour about what other people are saying and listen. I listened to what you had to say.
Point of order, I'm not being sour. But the greater Councillor McPherson would just keep his personal comments to himself.
Mr Chair, are you going to control this meeting
Yeah, I have
or not?
control of this meeting. If you could just be quiet and let me rule on it. I've had Councillor King...
Which point of order? The
Councillor
first,
King
the second, the
already
third
ruled.
or the fourth?
Councillor McPherson, you may continue.
Thank you. What's the ruling on the point of order? You just said you were going to make
The ruling
one.
on the point of order is that there is no type in the points of order here. I cannot find one that complies with the concern that Councillor Forsyth has.
Okay.
So please continue, but please...
If you looked up
Well,
the
I'll just have to
66
start again. Thank you, Mr Chair.
I think
And-
we've heard what you've already said, so I don't think there's any point in starting again.
Well, then perhaps you could warn Councillor Forsyth that to interrupt 4 times with spurious points of order is just deliberate disruption of the meeting.
Please continue.
Well, if you're not going to warn that, I will. You're being deliberately disruptive of the meeting. I sat there and listened to what you had to say, didn't speak until you finished. Perhaps you could do the courtesy yourself, and I wish that the chair would rule to that effect. Now, the only point I was going to make, I wasn't too fussed about this one way or another, but your speech saying that there was no, that Councillor Gallagher was being alarmist and there was no move to potentially close this library is simply inaccurate. There has been that discussion several times on this council, and clearly if you in any way limit...
Point of order. Sorry, but this has been taken out of context. What I was saying is that in this... What I'm trying to say is in this context, in this meeting right here, there has been no discussion about selling. There's just a proposal to have a look at
how many speeches did she hear?
There's actually no part in here that Councillor McPherson has pointed out to. The
Councillor Tesco,
we're actually discussing the sale.
Just hold.
That's not a point of order.
I'm allowed to talk to my point of order.
Councillor Forsyth.
Roll them both out of order and send them out of the room to cool off.
I don't intend to do that. Councillor Forsyth, which point of order are you relying on?
For her
inaccuracy. I haven't got it here in front of me, but the one that says that the points that Councillor McPherson is saying are inaccurate, and that what I was saying when I spoke a few minutes ago was the fact that we're not discussing selling the library at this particular debate. We're discussing a report.
I can't see anything on here that talks about inaccuracies. So I'm going to allow Councillor McPherson to continue, please.
Mr. Chair.
Point of order.
No. Councillor King, what's your point of order?
3.1, 13.7. E, where disorder is drawn to the attention of the chairperson. Could you please control the meeting?
I'm going to allow Councillor McPherson to continue.
Councillor Pascoe, as chair of the meeting, I wish to complain to you 5 times.
I'm asking you to continue with your discussion, otherwise I will ask you to cease.
So you'll ask me to cease, but you won't ask Councillor Forsyth, who has 5 times brought up points of order, all of which you've ruled against. But you won't ask her anything, but you'll ask me to desist. I'm sorry.
I'm not. I'm asking...
If you were doing your job as chair, you would be asking her to desist.
Chair, if you just give me a moment to speak, I've given you the opportunity to continue.
You haven't...
If you don't wish to... I've ruled that Councillor Forsyth...
She has interrupted me 5 times.
Listen to the chair.
I've ruled that Councillor Forsyth's point of order does not comply with standing orders, and I've asked you to continue, but I don't think you've got anything to say. You're not going
I beg your pardon?
Well, I'm getting that feeling...
I've got a lot to say, but every time I've tried to say it, you've allowed her to interrupt and haven't stopped her.
I have not. Now, please, do you wish to continue?
Look, just do your job as chair, please.
Do you wish to continue?
Are you going to guarantee that I can speak uninterrupted?
Do you wish to continue?
Are you going to guarantee that I can speak uninterrupted?
I will not guarantee that.
Oh, so, well, that's the sort of chair you are then. Okay, thank you. Then I can be free with my comments about that as well.
No, you can't.
Now, as I was saying before, I wasn't too fussed about this until I heard Councillor Forsyth talk about Councillor Gallagher being alarmist about the Hillcrest Library. Councillor Gallagher is not being alarmist. He's drawing on quite a short history of, quite a recent history of proposals that the Hillcrest Library might close. Now, Councillor Forsyth says we're only debating what's happening in this meeting. Well, Councillor Gallagher is actually saying it's not a very long period from this meeting back to when there were proposals to close the library. And he's also drawing on the point in the last council where Councillor Forsyth was present when the discussion took place that the Mayor mentioned about the Hillcrest Library, and the discussion included comments to the effect that if the library was ever to need to expand, it would need some of the floor space next door. And that is very relevant to this discussion. If you give a longer lease, on an area like that, then you do tend to limit the options. And it's quite a small point in some ways, but that is the point I believe Councillor Gallagher is making, and I have to agree with him. He's firmed up my opinion that it's not a good idea to extend the lease a little bit more now until we know the future of the Hillcrest Library and our library's strategy overall. And I think that he's raised some very relevant points. I'm going to support him in opposing this resolution because it is very much on the cards in some people's books, and I don't know whether that's in your books or not, Councillor Forsyth, but very much in the cards that the Hillcrest Library could in future close unless we secure its future by it being part of a plan. We don't have an understanding of that yet, so why would we make any changes now? Thank you.
Councillor O'Leary.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I'm comfortable supporting this. The library's plan that we accepted, and it is due to be reported back, certainly in this term around all the actions and things that are happening, talked strongly, one of the first projects in there was talking about community hubs. And we got a lot of, I wasn't on that working group, but we did get a lot of information about how important those libraries were to the communities. So there would certainly not be, and I sit on the Business and Investment Subcommittee, certainly not be any support from me moving towards restricting in any way any activities that the libraries are doing. And we know, you know, technology and everything else is moving, and that's all in that library's plan that I supported. And you know, we also, a big thing that came back from the communities and why we put community hubs in there is because they are by default acting as community hubs now, and we wanted to increase that. So I think that this actually is an opportunity to dip into the plan and look at the future of this. And I mean, there's 3 separate properties here. It may, I mean, I don't know what the discussion's going to be, but it may be as a result of this resolution that, you know, we retain one of those properties and strategically hang on to it for the future, for expansion, for community hub, for the future technology and all of the other things that were in the plan for our suburban libraries, and sell the other 2. So I'm quite comfortable that this is early in the discussions, but that this could help further along our objectives and our strategic objectives in our library's plan. So I'm quite comfortable with it.
Thank you. Just before I move to Councillor Mallett, who wishes to speak, Nicholas, can you just clarify on page 109 where the library is in the context of the photograph where I presume 58 are the 3 shops?
Yes, so the area bounded in red are the 3 shops,
Yep.
and immediately to the left you'll see 2 boxes. That is the library there.
And what's on the other side? That's
The far end is an automotive.
Station, isn't it?
Yeah, an automotive.
and that's owned separately.
Privately owned.
Privately owned. Okay. Okay. All right, Councillor Mallett. Thank you.
Thank you. I think one of the most important parts of this recommendation is the securing of continuation of 3 businesses, which are would be very much as important in terms of a community hub as the library itself. I'm not decrying the value of the library, but certainly the 3 families or 3 businesses certainly that rely on these leases, and it's important that they get some certainty to continue their businesses. So I think it's very important that we don't destabilise them.
Councillor King.
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
What's the return on these shops?
Sorry, I can't recall where that's noted, but 8.4% roughly.
And what,
Any further? Oh, sorry, you wish to participate in the debate?
what return do we get for our money
Where?
in the bank?
5.9% would be the amount we'd receive if this money was invested in the MEF cash reserve.
And 8.4% doesn't as return, and we get capital gains on top of that?
Yes, that's right.
Can I speak?
Yes, you may.
So on page 107.12, the council acquired the property in 1998 to provide for potential future development and expansion of the Hillcrest Library. So we bought it back then in case we did want to, because it's a strategic site, in case we do want to expand a library in the future. We don't know whether we want to expand a library or not at this stage. We haven't got that far, and this motion is not going to address that. This is about, he says, a report be presented to the Business and Investment Subcommittee to consider sale of the property. It doesn't, this isn't about a full library review, which we did have last year, which I chaired. This is about looking at selling off a piece of property independent of any library review. We're getting an 8.4% return, and we get 5% for our money in the bank, and we've got a strategic piece of property that we bought for a purpose, and we don't know whether we need it for that purpose or not yet. Don't be fooled. This is the beginning of the process of the sale of this property. This is the first step towards selling this property, and I think members around this table, when you consider why we bought it and that we're not having a library review attached to this, I think we'd be foolhardy, and we're making a very good return in the meantime. As well as that, on top of the 8.4%, we're making capital gain. So in this case, when you consider that the library may or may not need to expand in the future, we don't know, and we hold the property, why would we go through the sale process? So I would like to support A to D, but I don't support E, so I don't know whether we can somehow split up the vote on that, or we just have to vote against the whole thing.
Say that again, you don't support which one?
I do support A to D, but I don't support E. So I
You can put an amendment if you wish.
so I'll put an amendment forward to
Support E.
to support A
E,
to
sorry.
A to D.
A to D.
So as it is on the, in the agenda.
Original,
Yeah.
staff
Original. Sorry, Chair.
Sorry, yes.
I made a suggestion to the mover that to remove the heat in the debate, it could be removing the word sale and just the future. The future could mean the expansion of the library, to lock that in, or the sale of the other shop. So it's not presupposing what the outcome might be. So if you remove the, and it would be up to the mover.
I'll second the amendment from Councillor King.
All right, so we have...
It's not the same quite.
Okay, so we have an amendment, and the amendment is the same as the recommendation from staff. Is that my understanding, Councillor King?
Yes.
And we have a mover and a seconder for the amendment? Right, have we finished the debate? And if we have, I'd defer back to Councillor Forsyth, who would have the right of
Just have some questions.
Some questions, yes.
So we've got an amendment up, which is the original
Recommendation.
staff recommendation, which basically says till 2022.
It's
Because the
A through to C, yep.
Because the explanations have been given by Lance on behalf of the library in terms of potential development. And then we've got the original motion, which actually talks at this point still about a potential sale. So that would be Nicholas Wales's time and effort to actually start scoping the sale of that particular block. Is that correct?
There would be a report, I think.
A report. So that's involved time, staff
That
time
involves
and money and resources and scoping and all of that. So that's a very different, that's not a talk about the strategy of the library. That's just selling property. Have I got that right? I just want to clarify, that's all.
Well, yeah, it does call for a report to the B&I committee, so that's going to involve, as I read it, some staff time to put together a report to Business and Investment.
And Nicholas Wells and his team would lead that?
I assume so, but that would be a staff decision, not a...
Because
not
what
a
I'm trying to get at,
council decision.
the actual substantive motion sees it as a property matter for potential sale of a property. This motion is not actually around strategic development or expansion of the library.
Well, I thought it had already been suggested in the earlier questions that any such report would take into account the library, the strategic library report.
Yes, but with respect, and I've raised this with Richard Briggs, our excellent CEO, and I want to, you just go back to Rivoli and others, and this is not as, and I've talked to Nicholas personally, I respect totally his professional integrity, but the problem we have, and I hope we have changes in the way we report, is that, I don't want to just see Nicholas at the end of the table. That's the issue. We have a strategy around our library. We had a whole piece of work that Councillor King lent. A lot of public money was put into that, and it was taking us down a certain particular path. So it's very important that our head of library and Lance and his team are very much part of that process. You see what I mean?
As the excellent Chief Executive, thank you, Councillor.
Point of order.
I don't doubt Councillor Gallagher's integrity, to be fair, and his judgment either. Nicholas works extremely closely with all the departments involved in his decisions regarding lease sale and otherwise, and there's no question he'll work very closely with Lance and his team in this one as well.
Can we put the amendment up? Okay, well, given that we have debated, we have had a full discussion and debate on this.
I haven't had my right of reply.
I'm coming back to that right of reply. Yes.
I just want to check the motion as well. Yeah. Consider the future of the property, not consider sale. I think that's been a bit.
So you'd like to change?
Yes. So Councillor Chesterman will support, being the seconder, that the report is presented to the B&I subcommittee to consider the future of this property, which will take in all sorts of things into account: the scope of the library, potential.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Before there is a right of reply, which Councillor Forsyth is certainly entitled to. The fact is that a new amendment's gone on the table and the motion itself has been changed, and there are certainly some new issues that have come as a result of that. I would like to make a comment on, I didn't talk about before, there may be other councils. I think the proper way to handle that is to allow new issues to be debated before there's a right of reply, particularly the amendment itself came up after the last speaker.
Look, I'm going to suggest that we have a 10-minute deferment of the meeting so that we can perhaps discuss what the options might be.
Why?
Oh, that's my ruling as chair.
So you're just adjourning for 10 minutes?
Just adjourn for 10 minutes, yeah.
Thank you.